What's up, everybody, and welcome to Guns N' Roses Central. And we're doing another episode today of Guns N' Roses True Story, and we're talking about a song that was requested by a couple people. This one is Sympathy for the Devil. If you guys have watched some of my previous episodes, you would know that I've been doing a lot of Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 stuff, probably a little more heavy on Use Your Illusion 1 songs. I want to take a break this week and talk about Sympathy for the Devil. Now, Sympathy for the Devil is a special Guns N' Roses song because it's the last official recording released by the band to feature Axl Rose, Slash, Duff, and Matt Sorum. Now, before we can really talk about the song, let's set the stage for what happened with Guns N' Roses around late 93-94. So July of 93, Guns N' Roses played their last show as part of the Use Your Illusion tour. They played 2 shows in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and then, they were done their world tour as part of promoting the albums. So Guns took some time off. Duff released a solo album. The Guns also released a Spaghetti Incident in November of 1993. And, throughout 94, like the early part of 94, Guns N' Roses tried to get together in the studio. It was Axl, Slash, Duff, Gilby, Matt, and Dizzy. And they tried to collaborate on what would have been the next Guns N' Roses album, but things just didn't seem to work out that way. And then they took some time off. And Gilby went and released his solo record, Pawn Shop Guitars, in middle of 1994 or so. And it wasn't until the later part of 1994 where Guns N' Roses were actually approached by the producers of the upcoming film Interview with the Vampire. It was an adaptation of Anne Rice's novel. And as you guys know, Slash was a huge Anne Rice fan. He had talked about in interviews. If you guys ever saw the Guns N' Roses in Athens, Greece special, you can actually see him on the boat. And I think Matt Sorum or Duff is talking about their Slash over there reading the latest Anne Rice novel. Now, it's important to note that Interview with the Vampire was re-released in 4K several years ago, but it doesn't actually feature Guns N' Roses' cover of Sympathy for the Devil, only the original film does. So Slash recounted the story in an interview he did with Kerrang! Magazine in January of 1995 when he was promoting his solo project Slash the Snake Pit. So he said, "There's a funny story to Sympathy. When the movie came out a couple months ago, Geffen called and said, 'Could you do us a favor? That movie's coming out. It was a big issue for me because the books were great, and actually it was a David Geffen movie as well. He was at least producing it. He said that movie was coming out. It was a big issue for me. The books were great. They have kind of a passion in there, a sort of dark romanticism, and I'm a real heavy-duty, old-time vampire horror freak. And it was like Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, no effing way. So I got this call saying, would we do Sympathy for the Devil for the movie? I thought, well, okay, maybe it'll be a vehicle to get the band back together and get the wheels in motion for some pre-production stuff. So I went to the screening in one of those stiff theaters full of showbiz fucking suits, and I'm half asleep. I'm not having a good time, and I just couldn't get up there and leave. So I was trying to be cool. I started smoking some cigarettes, which is not something you're meant to do in an LA cinema. It's like murder. So I got up and left before the lights went out, and I have to say Tom Cruise did the best he could, but the film's laughable to me. The Stones version of the song was playing in the same place ours was meant to be. Anyway, I got up and went home. I called Doug and said, leave it, the Stones version is fine. There's no need to do a song that doesn't need to be redone. So he also told the story that after he went to see the screening, Axl went to see his own private screening of the film and loved it. And Axl was enthusiastic about getting the band back together in the studio to do a cover of the Rolling Stones song. So they basically went into the studio to go do a cover of the Rolling Stones song, but there was an issue with when people would show up. So Duff, Slash, and Matt showed up at the same time to record their parts for the song, but Axl wouldn't end up recording his vocals till about a week later. And then he also revealed how it was difficult to actually record the song without Axl being in the studio. He said while we were doing it, referring to recording the song, he said we had to write down how many bars each section was because without vocals, you don't know where the next change is going to come. Sympathy for the Devil is notorious in Guns N' Roses history because it created even a larger rift between Axl and Slash. Now, at the time that Guns N' Roses recorded Sympathy for the Devil, Gilby was still technically in the band. He did an interview with Songfacts about his last gig with Guns N' Roses, and he admitted that he knew it was the ending because nobody told me about it, referring to Sympathy for the Devil. He said, officially I was in the band at the time and they did the song without me. That was one of the last straws for me because nobody said anything to me, and they recorded a song by one of my favorite bands. It was pretty clear I'm a big Rolling Stones fan, and they recorded the song without me, so I knew it was it, referring to that he was no longer in the band. In the same interview, Gilby recalled his last moments in Guns N' Roses came in an unsurprisingly abrupt fashion. He said, my official end was actually at the last show of the tour, referring to the last show in Argentina. He said Axl was jokingly saying bye to everybody, but he was really saying bye to everybody. He came up to me and said, "Hey, enjoy your last show." At that point, I thought he was being funny, but he wasn't being funny. He knows what he's doing. He's a smart guy, so I knew it was the end of the last show. And to replace Gilby, Axl brought in one of his friends from Indiana, Paul Hughey, or Paul Tobias, as he's known by some fans as. He had written Back Off Bitch with Axl way back in like 1981 or so, and he played rhythm guitar on the track. And this actually created a lot of tension between Slash and Axl, because on Slash's first guitar solo in Sympathy for the Devil, you can hear a little answer to his guitar solo, and that's actually Paul Hughey's guitar. And Slash said he was never told about that until he actually got his version of the tape and listened back to the song. So Slash recalled the entire event in his book. He said, "We booked some time at Rumbo Studios. We did the basic tracks with Mike Klink over a few days. Duff, Matt, and I showed up together every day, basically going out of our way to do something that only Axl wanted to do. And not once did he show up to a session. From the basic tracks through to the final overdubs, we never saw or heard from Axl." He said, "We were already recording against our will, so his disregard for our time and commitment definitely inspired a very uninspired instrumental track. And needless to say, the level of bitterness and resentment reached an all-time high. It added insult to injury that after we'd completed our thoroughly average version of Sympathy for the Devil, it took him more than a week to show up to our studio to do his vocals. Once he got around to listening to the track, he had some constructive criticism via a lot of communications between middle people. I was told that I needed to re-record my guitar solo so that it sounded more note for note like Keith Richards' original. Now that really pissed me off, most of all because the message reached me 3 times removed, like we were playing a game of telephone." And of course, Slash's first reaction was no. He said he stood behind what he had done because why would I copy Keith if the song was supposed to be our version? And basically, Axl threatened to not sing on the track until Slash actually re-recorded his solo to sound more like Keith Richards. And Slash even said in his book that the week that Axl was supposed to go record his vocals in the studio, Slash actually went to the studio to go wait for him to talk to him about how pissed off he was. He said he waited 3 hours for Axl to finally show up, and then Axl showed up and basically came into the lounge and proceeded to talk to Slash from behind a magazine without looking at him in the eye for about 15 minutes. And he said he couldn't deal with it, so Slash just took off. And then Slash also said in his book how Paul Tobias playing over his guitar solo also pissed him off because he wasn't told about it, and basically it was sort of like a bad plagiarism according to him. Now Slash's original reaction to the song coming out when he did press interviews was mostly positive. He did one interview promoting the Guns N' Roses pinball machine with MTV, and also the topic of Sympathy for the Devil came up, and here's what he had to say about it.
An offer that I thought it was a great plot to get Guns more or less together and just start working as a unit. Pulled it off really well compared to like a lot of other bands that would have been offered to do it that I don't think could have really gotten to the vibe as well.
So Slash also talked about the recording of the song both in his book and on the VH1 special Behind the Music that was released in 2004 to promote Velvet Revolver's first record. He said, "If you've ever wanted to know what the sound of a band breaking up sounds like, listen to Guns N' Roses' cover of Sympathy for the Devil. If there's one Guns track I'd never like to hear again, it's that one." Now granted, Slash has since performed the song on a couple different occasions, although the version he's performed is closer to the Stones version than it is to the Guns version. There's a video of him playing Sympathy for the Devil at Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp a couple of years ago, and then there's also a version of him playing Sympathy for the Devil along with some members of Jane's Addiction and Travis Barker of Blink-182. So if you guys want to check out those videos, I've linked to them down below. And Duff also commented on the song in 2011. He was interviewed by the Onion AV Club, and he was asked about the atmosphere when recording Sympathy for the Devil. He said it wasn't good, largely because the huge difference for him was that he was actually sober. His pancreas had exploded around April or May of 1994, and Guns had recorded the song around October of 94. So, it was his first time really recording sober in the studio. And he talked about how he had tried to change his life. And he also talked about how the band was now a backseat to him taking care of himself. He said, "I saw the session for what it was for. Paul Hughey, Axl's friend, the guitar player guy, really saw this as an opportunity. I saw opportunities being taken advantage of. I saw management freaking out. I saw Slash in a fucking awful black and darkened malaise. and Matt had gotten sober. A lot of people were coming to me, management and the record company. I didn't get a second to be sober, and they said, now that you're sober, you got to save this thing. And I kind of really thought I did it for the first year or two, because so many people were saying that to me. I started to figure out in my second year of sobriety, oh, I don't have to do this shit. And then this wasn't the first time that Duff had actually mentioned it. So in 2004, he was doing an interview for Velvet Revolver, and he said the Sympathy for the Devil was probably the worst track that Guns N' Roses ever recorded, and it broke up the band. And this is from the guy who thinks that My World is a great song. And then in 2009, Axl actually briefly mentioned Sympathy for the Devil. He was doing an interview with Spinner.com. He was asked about whether he thinks that Slash can still play guitar really well. And Axl said, I prefer to listen to others in general, especially those who push their talents and infuse them with a level of energy that I've seldom heard in his efforts over the years. He said, it wasn't there with me on Sympathy for the Devil or the Spaghetti Incident, and it took years for me to get there again. In my opinion, and in the ways I wanted it to be. Will I keep it? Who knows? I'd like to, but who can say? And the song was officially released in the US in December of 1994, and then it was released in the UK in January of 1995, and it did reasonably well on the charts. It sold over 50,000 copies in Japan, which meant it was certified gold, and it reached number 55 on the US Billboard Hot 100, and it was a top 10 hit in the UK when it came out. And it was featured on Guns N' Roses' Greatest Hits album, which came out in 2004. And then finally, it's not really a demo, but somebody was able to sort of, I guess, remix the song and bring the vocals volume down so you can actually hear the instrumental a lot more in the song. So if you guys want to check that out, I've linked to it down below in the description box. So let's do what we always do in each episode, which is see where the song ranks on the Guns N' Roses best to worst song list. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, they ranked Sympathy for the Devil pretty low on the list. It was the 75th best Guns N' Roses song. And Spin.com was a little less generous, saying that Sympathy for the Devil is the worst Guns N' Roses song of all time. It was 79th on their list. And then finally, the last list we'll look at is Medium.com. They were a lot more generous. They ranked it number 43 on their list out of 80 songs or so. So that does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on the true story I did today. Where does Sympathy for the Devil rank for you guys? Are you guys a fan of the Guns N' Roses cover, or do you think it's a travesty to the Stones version? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel for all things related to Guns N' Roses. Be sure to follow me on Facebook and on Twitter. I've got my social media links down below. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.